Today we're going to talk about the top 20 vintage items you can sell on eBay that will make you some big money. Hey, it's Don. Today we're going to talk about the top 20 vintage items that you or I can sell on eBay and make a lot of money. Now, these are items that I actually sell or have sold, and we have done extremely well in these specific items. All of the items I'm going to talk about today are all vintage. Everything in here is something that was made at least 20 years ago for the most part, if not much longer ago. And in many cases, these are everyday items that were mass-produced for the masses a long time ago that still carry a tremendously good amount of value. Now, in no particular order, vintage electronics can sell extremely well. Even when something is broken, we've been able to take them apart and sell them for pieces. A good example of that are reel-to-reel players. Usually just the hubs on one of those things, even if it's broken, you might be able to get 25 to 50 bucks or even more depending on the version or the model. That can go for record players as well as a ton of vintage electronics. Parts and pieces always sell because people always need to get them to repair their version, their unit that they own. Now, another one we've delved into heavily has been soda shop collectibles, whether it be signs that are tin, cardboard, vintage bottles, vintage labels, uniforms, patches, geez, anything you could think of. They made records, pens, pencils, matchbooks, postcards, covers, letterheads, all that sort of thing you could find for specific soda shops. Now, if you find the right item, it can be worth thousands of dollars. A good Coke sign, a couple $1,000s. There's neon signs that even show up. Coke coolers, bottles, even vintage cans from the 50s. Say a cone top can go for hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Now, artwork and prints we have always made money in, especially vintage engravings, actual full-fledged engravings from the 19th century. Now, even engravings that would be found in a book can carry some good value. In many cases, when a book has been damaged, we will cut that book up and sell the individual engravings. Again, they have to be original and actual engravings. Many times, too, we can find prints in frames that are signed and numbered that can carry some good value. A good example would be like the Greenwich Workshop. A lot of their pieces, whether they're a puzzle, a print, a statue, ceramics, or anything like that, can carry a good value because the artists these folks picked up are well sought after. Many of them do Christmas and holidays as well, and those are the higher dollar ones also. Now, another area that I honestly do love, and I do have a large collection myself, are vintage leather jackets. If it's vintage, you can make some incredibly good amount of money off of them. We've picked up some ratted out leather jackets from the 20s and 30s for $5 and $10 that we were able to sell even in those conditions for $500 to $950. There's a lot of money to be made in vintage punk from the 80s, 70s rocker, bike ones that are made out of horsehide leather. Those are usually worth the most. Horsehide leather or pigskin leather jackets from the 30s and 40s will also sell for some phenomenal amount of money. One thing I personally look for are cafe racers or any leather jackets that have zippers on the cuffs with belt buckles on the back. Now, for those who've watched my channel, you know I'm heavy into paper. Postcards are something we sell every single day of the week, nonstop, all year round. Sometimes of the year, we sell a ton of them a day. Postcards, used or not, sell just as well. It does not matter if they're used or not. Now, comic books is another massive one. I collected them as a child. I've got a ton in inventory pretty much any given day of the week. Comic books are something you can pick up in big bulk if you know what you're doing and make out like a bandit because most people don't know their issues. They only collected one line or one type or one superhero, one title of comics, and they're not familiar with most other things. If there's a first appearance or an introduction to somebody well known in a comic book, those are almost always worth more than any of the other issues with that same character in it. Vintage photographs as well, I do extremely well in. Any type of photos can sell extremely well. The vintage ones usually sell for the most, like a daguerreotype. The daguerreotype is printed on brass. It's a brass plate with the actual image on it. You've got tin types, which is literally done on a piece of tin. You've got ambrotypes, which are literally done on a piece of glass. class. Military ones are some of the top ones on my list, like a CDV of a soldier from the Civil War. A CDV is a carte de vista. It's a small size, limited in size, I should say, picture mounted on a card. Cabinet cards are another one. They're mounted on bigger cards usually. Snapshots of famous people do extremely well. Real photos of people on postcards can even sell as a photo. 8x10s as well are something that we mess in very heavily also. Now, film stock and footage is another one. Whether it be home movies or mass-produced Hollywood classics, they were all available on 8mm for home use, 16 for home use, as well as 35mm for theatrical release, and even up to 70mm. Any of those can carry a decent value. Just a trailer, just a little 2 or 3 minute trailer for a coming attraction of a movie, even that came out in the 70s, can sell for hundreds of dollars. Some can sell for thousands. So if you say find any segment of say 35mm or 70mm film from Revenge of the Jedi, the trailer that came out, those are incredibly scarce. The original name of Return of the Jedi was originally Revenge of the Jedi. If you want to see something interesting, look up that whole story. You'll find it on Chrome as well. Now back on along the lines of paper, sheet music. Now sheet music is something that I can get in bulk, and I'm talking massive bulk, thousands of them at any given time. I've picked up loads that would fill my van a couple times over in just sheet music. It's almost always cheap, and there are a ton of them that sell for some good money. Even sheet music from the 90s, 2000s, and above can go for some phenomenal money. Say Pearl Jam, Collective Soul, Bush, anything like that. Any of those alternatives, rap, R&B, does extremely well. Montel Jordan, This Is How We Do It, that one sells well. I mean, there's a ton of sheet music that can go very well. Going back to Elvis, you go back to pre-war jazz, ragtime, any of that sort of thing can sell off the charts for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. Now, records, tapes, CDs, media in general like that goes extremely well. Records, for an example, we've sold records, 45 singles, for up to $4,000 for a single one. We've sold LPs for thousands of dollars. We've sold 12-inch singles, jukebox hits, all sorts of things can sell for some phenomenal money. Same thing goes for DVDs if you get the right one. Any of that media type of material goes well. Cassette tapes of rock bands, AOR, album-oriented rock, goes extremely well. First pressing, say, of Motley Crue, like a demo tape or something like that, demo cassette tape. All of those sorts of things would be falling into that category. You may have some in your house right now that could be worth some money. If you need to start selling on eBay, those would be some good things to start with. Now, vintage toys in general go extremely well. Now, with vintage toys, you've got plushes, you've got Army Men action figures, all that sort of thing falls into that toy range. We do extremely well with vintage action figures, even just going back to the 70s, 80s, and even through into the 90s. There are some action figures that still sell for some good money. Vintage G.I. Joe from the 80s do extremely well. One of my favorites, Microman by Takara from Japan, and then the U.S. versions, Micronauts. I collected those. I had hundreds of those at one time. Original Star Wars figures from the 70s, 80s do phenomenally well. Mego figures going back through the 60s and stuff. Army Men by Marx, all of those go extremely well. Plushes, My Pet Monster, anything like that. Care Bears, extremely well sellers across the board also. All of those sorts of categories are fair game. Pretty much all the items I'm telling you, you can make hundreds if not thousands of dollars in every one of these categories if you find the right item. And who knows what you got laying around right now. Now, along the lines of toys are board games. We do extremely well with board games, card games, and things along that line. They sell extremely well if you have the right one. Aliens, Star Wars, all of those sorts of things, even going farther back, Roy Rogers board games, even the original Monopoly from the 30s or so, all of those sorts of things can sell for some phenomenal money. The more complete they are, the older they are, the better the graphics they are. A Man from U.N.C.L.E., for example, something like that, you can get $100 or better. An Alien one from '79, extremely well. An original Star Wars, $50 to $100. So just some common ones, Laverne and Shirley, Mork and Mindy, pretty much any TV series or movie you can think of from the 70s and 80s, or even before that, they made something along that line of. So all of those are highly collected, and they'll always sell no matter what. Now, continuing along with games, video games, vintage video games. I grew up on Atari 2600, 5200, Commodore, the Amiga, all of those sorts of things I've played and I know very, very well. ColecoVision, I have one here right now. All of those are worth some decent money. Even if they don't work, people will buy them for parts and pieces, just like I was talking about with vintage electronics. Handheld ones do extremely well also. Even the original Pong with just the little dials on those units, they go well. So do the Sony versions of those, Sears versions, any of those, telegames, any of those sorts of things can go for some phenomenal money. Even games for PCs, vintage PC video games. Going back to 286s, 386s, the original IBMs, the big giant floppies, a lot of those can go for some good money. The small 3 1/4 inch floppies, any of those, if you get the right title, will go for some mega bucks. I've seen and sold some for hundreds. I've seen some as well that went for thousands of dollars. Now, books are another area that we've played heavily in as well. There's something that you can scan and bulk list. You can sell them on eBay. You can sell them on Amazon. Most of the items on this list can be sold on multiple platforms. Etsy, eBay, Amazon, across the board. Books in general do extremely well. You can check out the value of them before you buy them just by the barcode scanner on your phone. Another area in books that most people miss are paperback books. If you're not paying attention, paperbacks, ones you cannot scan with a book scanner or your phone, most people don't spend the time to look up. If you spend some time in digging in, you will find that some paperbacks can easily sell for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. Some first edition books were only published as a paperback. Along the same lines, there are magazines that we have personally sold for thousands of dollars. There's lots of material in the book magazine, paperback section that are worth a ton of money. Now, one area I'm not very heavy in is sports, but there's a lot of money to be made in sports collectibles, vintage sports collectibles. I do delve into Victorian sports-related trade cards, tobacco cards as well, so I do find some of the earliest versions of some of the sports cards, and some of those we've sold for $500 to $1,000 a piece for one single trade card. Now, military is another section that does carry some tremendous value. My father was in the military. I've grown up as a military child. I am heavy into military things in general. I do military uniform buttons, belts, buckles, uniforms, accoutrements, anything that I can get my hands on. Civil War stuff is great. Rev War stuff is even better. But World War I, World War II, Korean War, and even Vietnam War items right this very second are selling for top dollar. Everybody's buying them up. Whatever it is, whether it's a shirt, a patch, a bomber jacket, boots, even dirty boots you might find can still carry some value if they're combat boots. Bayonets, swords, all that kind of thing. Belts, buckles, canteens, anything along that line can carry a tremendous value. One patch off of one jacket can sell for $5,000 easily if you have the right one, like a bomber jacket patch. Bomber jackets in general can sell for $20,000, $30,000. Stuff that shows up at a garage sale, stuff that shows up in an estate sale. All of these items carry a tremendous value. These are all items that I delve into whenever I can. Another huge area for us are transportation-related items. Items tied to airlines, items tied to specific railroads, even busing lines, steamships, the whole works. Any of that sort of thing. You can find plates, cups, saucers, silverware, curtains even I've seen in the past, wallpaper segments from them with the ship's logo all over it, menus from the ships, passenger lists, photos, postcards for sure. The Titanic is a perfect example of pretty much anything from that ship. The White Star Line that actually owned it at the time can sell off the hook. A button from a uniform could sell for a few $100s, a china plate for hundreds of dollars. Now, a lot of the items you might find for, say, the Titanic may not necessarily have been on that ship, but are identical to what have been on that ship. Any class of ship, and there were other ones that had sister ships, the Titanic, would have had the exact same logos, and basically everything would be the same, other than maybe specific postcards of rooms that would have only been available on one specific ship or the other. Railroad, the same thing. You can run into anything you could think of from the railroad. I've seen seats and benches available from railroad trains and subway cars and trolley cars, uniforms, hats, badges, buttons, letterheads, stamped envelopes, advertising signs, handbills, any type of thing like that can turn up. Silverware as well for railroads. Same thing for airlines. You can find china plates, cups, silverware, advertising. Luggage labels are a huge one that falls into this area. We've sold luggage labels for $500 and $600 for just a small piece of paper that would have been stuck on someone's luggage. Now, entertainment-related items. Movie and television collectibles sell extremely well. Along with the photo line, you can find lobby card stills, posters, half sheets, any of that sort of thing. Press kits are another one that are huge. Transparency, slides from the movies. Going back to film footage, you can find film and trailer from them as well. But any of the advertising material that was put out for a TV show or a movie can carry a huge value. Many of these items as well that I'm talking about can have cross-category interest. So one item might fall into 5 or 6 of these category specifics I'm talking about. One item could be sold technically in 5 or 6 different categories because it all ties in with those various categories. A good example would be from a killer sci-fi movie that just came out, a Marvel superhero movie that's hot. Everybody wants all of that material. Banners that may have hung in a theater, posters, two-side posters, large transparency posters, lobby card stills, as I said, giveaways, promotional items, pins, buttons, any of that sort of thing tied to a hit movie, even going back to 1910, say a 1931 Frankenstein advertisement, something like that would just be worth phenomenal amounts of money. Posters from the 20s, 30s, and 40s have sold for $50, $60, $70, $100,000 in the past. China and pottery does extremely well. I don't mess so much with it unless it's a quick turnaround and there's a lot of money to be made. We've sold some tremendously high ones. Rookwood's a good example of some that we've had in the past as well. There are some designer ones, Roseville and things like that, original ones that sell off the charts. China plates are another one. You can find them again tied to transportation and so many other areas. Say one from the White House from the 1890s or something. A Lincoln plate, one that was in his own dining room. Those sorts of things are actually out there. Many people just don't know the patterns or the designs on them to know what they're from. So those sorts of things do turn up. Even restaurant ware, china and things like that. I've even sold some from McDonald's, from the heyday of McDonald's with the original characters on them, and those go for some phenomenal money. Let's say Las Vegas or a Tahoe resort or a gambling establishment that hasn't existed in 50 or 60 years. A good ashtray from some place like that could go for hundreds of dollars as well. And lastly, these last two ones are usually tied together. Stamps and coins. I know they're two technical different categories, but most people that mess with stamps tend to mess with coins as well. I do both of them whenever possible. Stamps in general, you can buy one single stamp book off some shelf at a garage sale or a flea market, and there could be a stamp in there worth $10, $20, $30, $40,000 or even more than that. There are still tons of stamps floating out there in the wild that could carry some horrendous amount of money. Coins as well. You could have pocket change, errors and misprints, or some rare coin that's got out that could be still found in pocket change. That sort of thing does still happen. We've personally found coins in our pockets worth hundreds and hundreds of dollars. If you want to do coins, you can actually get boxes of rolled coins from customers of theirs. Not from the mint or anything else like that, but used rolled coins from, say, restaurants and things like that going into their deposits. Many times we can find silver in those, $half sometimes, quarters for sure, dimes for sure, 40% nickels from 43, 44, 45. Those sorts of things still do show up in those sorts of lots. So all of these items that I've mentioned here are items we have played heavy in. With these items also, the more you know about these specific types of items, the more money you will make, the more potential you will have across the board. Now, all these items would be niches as well. You could specialize in just one of these items and make a completely decent living doing that. All of these items carry the potential for that. You just have to learn more about each of the items so you know what you're doing in these categories. Some of them will be easy. Maybe you grew up on action figures and comics and toys like I did, and you already know most of the key players from the vintage ones that are worth money. Look around the house for things like this as well and start looking them up to see what carries a value. If you want to be successful, learn as much as you can about the items that you are selling. You'll do far better. Your goal is to know more than the people you are buying from and sourcing from, so you can pick out the diamond in the rough. But anyway, that's what I have for you today. Hopefully that gave you some ideas, some thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button down below. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified if I post new content or go live. Subscribe and tell all your friends.
It's an alien.
No kidding. Where?
It's living in America.
I like what they've done with the place.
It loves cats.
Can't get enough of them.
It's Alf, and now it's everywhere.
He's debonair, and yet fuzzy. My parents just don't understand our relationship. I mean, this whole cat thing's been blown all out of proportion. Alf.
Alf, alien life form new from Coleco.